We ready? Let's do the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Another episode of the Record Shepherds.
Hello.
We are joined. Well, let's not get to who we are joined by. We have Danny, myself, and Jason, the shepherds, if you will. And,
hello.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Very well indeed.
Good to see you guys.
We're back in the studio for episode 9. Nearly at 10. So this is a significant episode because 10 is our first goal. And it's still the summer in New York City. It is hot outside, and we've decided to turn off the AC in the studio for the first time in the summer. So could be a hot little episode, this one.
Spicy.
We'll Spicy.
Exciting.
So for those of you watching on YouTube, and please do go and follow us, subscribe on YouTube, you will see that once again we have a new face on the couch. She's waving. And today on the episode we are joined by A&R publisher Emi Horikawa. Welcome, Emi.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
I'm very jealous of your crisscross on the couch. It's something I should do. Is that something you work on?
It's something you do when you have short legs.
Oh.
Yeah.
Very comfortable.
Yeah.
My flexibility is absolutely awful. I've been watching some of these episodes back, and like me just trying to get comfortable on this couch is it's an ongoing struggle. So
I think maybe we'll do a segment of the show. We'll start doing yoga together.
That helps.
Yeah, who's that?
Yeah.
Who's that YouTube yoga lady?
oh, there must be loads of
I
them.
forget what her. No, but
there's a specific.
there's a woman.
Yeah, yoga with Jessica or something. So forgive me if that's not.
Something,
Yeah. We gotta have her on the couch.
Certainly get her in the corner. I could do with that, honestly. A bit of yoga and meditation. We need to get into the Zen before we jump into these Record Shepherd podcasts. So I'm all for that. We can look into that, Tim.
Yeah. How was your weekend, Emi?
It was nice. Yeah. I don't. What did I do? Oh, I saw Thor this weekend. I really enjoyed that.
You're the first one I've heard say that. Everyone has been destroying that
Really,
movie.
I thought it was. I thought it had all the elements of like what was great about the last one. It was funny. There was action.
Right.
I enjoyed it.
So the feedback that I've heard, not to make this a Marvel review episode, was that a lot of people have said since Endgame they've sort of been lost in terms of like where they're going with Marvel. There's no real like thing building up to it. So the movies haven't been, except for Shang-Chi. I heard that one was amazing. I've seen it. It was amazing. But
Interesting. I guess I don't think of it in that context, but I like this better. Like I really liked the first Doctor Strange, and then this last one I didn't think had the same quality that made the last one really great. Like I still enjoyed it, but I felt like the last Thor and this one was consistent, like in style and theme, and I enjoyed it. I'm a Thor fan.
I haven't seen it.
It just came out, so it's okay.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. I'm still raving about Top Gun.
I heard there's a new Elvis movie too, right? Like
Yeah, that came out
Yeah.
last weekend. It did really big numbers. When I saw the previews, I had zero interest in seeing it, but people seem to really liked it.
Do you know, growing up, I was always, in terms of those icons of music that really changed the game, like I was very much into the Beatles, but I have to say, it wasn't that I didn't like Elvis, but maybe it didn't do it for me, or maybe my dad didn't play enough Elvis, so I didn't get exposed to it. But since I've come to the States, I've been to Graceland. I feel like continuing the song there, Simon Garfunkel, but I've been to Graceland, and I also went to Tupelo in Mississippi, which was Elvis's birthplace.
Oh, okay.
Did the little tour. Like he had grew up in such a small little, probably like two room in the countryside, and he had like a porch out the front and everything. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful setting, but very, very small. But I've learned and come to understand and respect so much of what Elvis did and what he was about. And if ever you get the opportunity to go to Graceland, go check it out. It is pretty amazing.
I would definitely go if I was there. I wouldn't go necessarily out of my way. I don't feel passionately about Elvis.
Yeah,
like he's an icon.
I'm on the
he's
same boat.
important, but it's not my
Well, all I'm saying is my opinion changed
sure.
having visited Graceland. So,
And speaking of Elvis and music and an Elvis movie, I think this is a great segue into publishing. So maybe Jason, you can describe why we have Emi on. Why is this important?
yes, yeah, absolutely, Tim. So, as I've already alluded to, Emi is an A&R, a publishing A&R at one of the major publishers. So Emi is very experienced in the publishing game, and she will tell you a little bit more about her experience as we talk further through the episode. But so far, we've covered a lot of topics for you guys, and we have talked and touched a little bit about publishing, specifically in our royalties episode. But just to give a little bit of a recap, especially for some of you who are very new to the music industry and the different rights involved, etc., etc. Traditionally, there are two sets of rights when we talk about recorded music, let's say. You have the copyright in the actual recorded music itself, the sound recording, or the master as it's commonly referred to. And that's typically the world of record labels and artists, etc., and going into the studio and recording. Separately from that, and its own set of rights, there's copyright in the underlying composition or the song. So the world of publishing that's what we're here to talk about today, and that's what Emi's area of specialty is. So obviously, it's one of the very true things. There is no record industry without the publishing industry. There is no record industry without the songwriters and the people who are actually composing the music, and everything from the pop songs and the rock songs that we listen to, hip hop, right the way through to composing for scores of films, etc., etc. So the genesis of music starts with the songwriting, and they are so important to the industry. And I think, like most of us, and I say us because I have written songs in my previous life as a budding musician, but that's where it comes from. That the music comes from within, and when we're sitting down and we're getting together and we have this dream to express music and write songs, that's the crux of it before you even go into the studio. So it's we're honored to have someone of Emi's experience and caliber with us, and she's probably too modest to say so I will let you know that Emi's clients include Tool, Korn, Ghost, Rise Against, and many, many more of bands. I think fair to say you have a personal, a slant towards that sort of rock genre, because that is your area of interest.
Yes, I primarily work with artists and producers who write. So in the rock space.
In the rock space. But I think separately that, we have to bear this in mind, that a lot of what we're talking about today, as Emi says, is actually artists who write their own music, etc. But this also applies to songwriters who have no ambitions to be artists. They're purely songwriters, and they, don't necessarily perform their songs, etc. So all of this sort of will ring true.
That's a great intro, Jason. And I think we can start with maybe the first question for Emi. Just based off of that, can you maybe educate us on what the difference is between an A&R on the publishing side? Like, what is an A&R, and maybe the difference between like an A&R on the publishing side versus the recording side?
What does A&R even stand for?
Yeah.
A&R stands for artist and repertoire. I don't know like the history of where that name came from, but basically it's like a talent scout. At the company that I work with, we don't even necessarily call it A&R, we call it creative, but it's, the department where we work with songwriters, artists, producers, and create creative opportunities. So whether it's sessions for their project or writing with other artists or, or writing for film and TV, that's kind of, in addition to, of course, like signing deals, that's my responsibility, is the creative side, discovering new talent.
What would you say, like, based off of that, the percentage of, I think it's important, that breakdown, because I feel like a lot of people, when they think about A&R, it's just scouting, right? They're not even incorporating like the session work that goes into it, like facilitating these events that create awesome songs. So what percentage of what you do is, say, split between like scouting versus actually like working to make the music and make sure like that's all situated?
Percentage is hard to say, but I guess
to the nearest decimal point.
33.33. No. I mean, I think, at the end of the day, I guess there's like half of it, which is like the work and doing the research and signing the deals and the admin side, all those important things that like are the behind the scenes stuff. And then the other half of the job is, actually engaging the client, creating opportunities. And what that means for every client is totally different. And I think it's based on their needs and their goals. But ideally, it's 50-50.
And I guess, for people who do know a little bit about A&R and but maybe don't work in the music industry, I guess, you're right. A lot of people just initially think, oh, A&R, they're the people lurking in the back corners of darkened showrooms, and they're the gatekeepers to whether you're going to get a deal. On the record side, it's a record deal, and on the publishing side, it's going to be a publishing deal / songwriting deal, and we will talk a little bit about those. But, is that the case? Are you out there, or are other A&Rs actually out there at shows, sort of like seeing what's going on, looking for new talent, or what other ways does new talent come to you?
I mean, of course, like, people probably aren't primarily finding new talent by just going to shows and doing it the old way. Obviously, the internet exists now and social media, and that's how I think most people are discovered these days. I mean, because I'm mostly working with artists and artists of the rock genre, to me, like, the live side is still really important. And I like going to the shows and, how something sounds on a recording versus what their abilities are on stage, or just for me, like, even after I've signed a client, like, going to the show, I hear things and get inspired in ways that I don't experience from just listening to something on my computer. So, it's definitely not just shows. To me, it's important, but other people who I know who do similar jobs, they don't care about like the live experience. It's not important. They can get what they need from just the records or from what other, information that they have. So I think it's a very personal process. Everyone
has their own sort of way of going about their work, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think there's any right or wrong way. Like with any creative process, it's just what works for you.
Yes.
Like, you can't make art wrong, and I don't think you can like discover somebody or sign somebody. I mean, I guess maybe you can if the deal's really bad. But
yeah, fair enough. That surprises me to hear. On the publishing side, that people, well, I guess on either side really, that they wouldn't be as focused or wouldn't attach as much weight to the live. And
I mean, for songwriters, not all, like we said, not all songwriters are artists. So obviously for songwriters, you can't necessarily go see them live. So largely, maybe they just, write or they produce. Producers, like, they don't perform live.
No.
So you can't experience
that. Makes sense. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. You would think for where it's the case of artists who are writing their own material, etc., it would be
I would have thought
very
so,
important.
But the person that I'm thinking of, he's an A&R at a record label, and to him, he doesn't care.
Name him and shame him.
No,
Name
never.
No, don't. Yeah, well, that does give a little bit of an insight. So, there'll be a lot of people, our audience, and as we keep talking about here on the Record Shepherds podcast, it's education through conversation, and there'll be a lot of independent artists who are doing their thing, and they are at the stage where they are out there performing, let's say, and I guess it's good to know that there are people, you can get people along to shows, etc. Have you ever, I guess we're talking about the internet. The internet exists now, and it is such a great way of getting your music out there and getting in front of people you probably otherwise wouldn't have been able to get in front of. Have you ever heard, or have you personally had people reach out to you that you have no clue who they are and either invite you along to a show? I'm sure you've had countless demos sent to you, but what does that process look like nowadays on the songwriting publishing side?
I mean, it's definitely tough, and I feel for people who are budding artists and songwriters and stuff to just kind of like reach out and to send an email to you. They don't, I don't know them, they don't really know me, and expect me to listen to their music and go to a show. It almost never works that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are still some people who will take submissions and are willing to listen to it, but there is, like, especially working in a big company, there's a level of liability where you just like actually can't listen to that stuff because that's how some of these copyright infringement cases have happened, where somebody's, they've heard a demo and suddenly it's in some released song, and then they say that's how. So a lot of places aren't like legally allowed to accept them. So I would say that's, I guess you can try that way, but I think the success rate is really low getting in touch with anybody that way. The way we mostly will accept these kind of things, or we'll have just people reach out, is through managers or attorneys or references, somebody that knows somebody, some kind of connection. So you kind of have somebody to vouch for it. And of course, how you reach out to find a manager or an attorney or whatever, that's, I don't know, maybe they're more willing to just listen to random demos that just appear in their inbox, but don't do a lot of that.
No, yeah, fair enough. It makes total sense, and it's a good point you raise about the copyright infringement. Like, as the demos, the actual, where was the opportunity for this music to be heard, and that is indeed something that people have to be mindful of these days. So it makes total sense.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, maybe if we can transition a bit to like the actual deals that you help negotiate, or you're helping artists and the publisher through. What are, as an artist, when I'm approached by a publisher or when I'm in negotiation with a publisher, what are the types of deals that I could expect to be represented to me?
I mean, I'm primarily dealing with co-pub or admin deals, but there are definitely different types of deals. And in Nashville or in the UK or like in Japan, most publishing deals are single song deals, which I think is more common in Europe, but like you don't really see that very much here. In Nashville, they do different kinds of deals where terms are only 1 year, and it's somebody was telling me it's like a full co-pub where you actually are giving 100% of the copyright for a limited term, as opposed to when I do a deal with a co-pub deal, it's a 50% copyright transfer. So we're not taking the writer's share. We're not taking, we're only taking our piece of the publisher share. So like I said, like it's different, I guess in city to city, or like, the types of genres or artists or writers that you're working with, but I'm primarily doing like relatively straightforward co-pub or admin deals.
Yeah, and let me just shed a little bit of light there for a lot of viewers who are brand new to publishing. A co-publishing deal is very common in the United States, and it's essentially an arrangement where a songwriter will sign a deal with a music publisher like the one that Emi works for, and that usually it will be in return for advances of royalties. So you're getting a lump sum of advances up front. You in return are agreeing to write exclusively for that company, for that music publisher. So any songs that you write during the term of that agreement will be administered, and not just administered, but co-owned. That's why it's a co-publishing deal. You're typically giving 50% of the ownership of those songs to the publisher, often for the life of copyright.
I don't think anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah,
that's
not anymore.
been changed. Okay.
I don't think I've done a life of copyright deal maybe ever. I think it's now that advances have decreased so much, just kind of as the trend across the board, I don't think anybody should be giving away life of copyright unless you're getting like a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay. So that is, and that's where a good attorney comes in, actually. So we were talking about, when's a good time to get an attorney. When it comes to negotiating agreements, we said, that are going to have a profound impact on your career. That's the sort of thing a good attorney will do for you. But traditionally, it was for the life of copyright. But more recently, that has come down to, and the number of years that that the publisher will be administering your works exclusively varies. But that typically what we're talking about, they will. Well, actually, that's actually a good point, because it does bring us on to the other type of agreement, which is very common, which is an publishing administration agreement. What I guess the question I want to ask, tell us a little bit about what does a publisher actually do for a songwriter? What benefit is there to signing up with a publisher? Be it a co-publishing agreement or an administration agreement.
So all publishers offer intellectual property management, so administering the copyright. So the song that you write, the most important thing is the registrations, making sure that your copyright is registered around the world, because basically publishing, right, like in any situation that music is used or, paid for, any scenario, publishing is involved. So whether you play live, whether it's on the radio, if it's streaming, if it's a ringtone, if somebody bought your CD, publishing's involved. So there's a lot of different income types, and the rules for publishing the rule for copyrights differs from country to country. So it's our job to know all those rules and to make sure that if your music is out there being used, that people know how to pay you. So that's kind of like the baseline services that all publishers will offer. That's really what publishing is. The additional stuff that somebody like myself brings to a deal is the creative services. So there are some companies out there that are strictly administration. That's all they do. They don't offer any kind of sync creative, licensing. So if you want your music pitched for film, TVs, some of those companies don't do that. Even if you got a sync request in and you needed somebody to negotiate it, even though they're administering your copyright, they won't do that. You'll have to handle all those negotiations directly. You'll have to sign the contract. You'll have to invoice them to get paid. With a big publisher, or a full publisher like myself or one of the majors or whatever, we do all those things for you. So you basically don't need to do anything except deliver us your songs. So the splits, the audio, all that stuff. You deliver the assets, and then we take care of everything else.
Okay, so in a nutshell, if you sign up with a publisher, they are going to make sure that everything is taken care of to ensure that the uses of your money are correctly paid for and the money collected and accounted to you. So you're not out there trying to do all that of yourself, which sounds like an absolute nightmare. And more importantly, that's time where you should be doing the things that make an artist and a songwriter, right? Writing the music, getting creative, not doing these relatively menial administrative tasks.
Yeah, I mean, they say that publishing is like a industry of pennies. It's a penny business. So there's just like tons of different income sources, and they're all earning small amounts of money. And when it comes together, then it ends up being something significant, but you have to go and collect it from all these different sources. And it's not necessarily straightforward. And that's where the expertise of a publisher really, adds a lot of value.
So with the publishers, if they're sort of incentivized to, make sure your music is used as much as possible because they're giving you the advance, and they're also like a co-publisher, right, of whatever music that you write. So that it sort of behooves them to try to find, whatever situations they can to make sure that song is profitable.
Yeah, and just to expand on that, that's one thing I didn't say. Like, this is a very important point on a co-publishing deal or an administration deal. Regardless of whether or not you are being paid an advance, and as we've discussed on previous episodes, an advance is just an upfront payment of your royalties which have not yet been earned. But of course, the hope is that your songs, or on the recorded music side, your tracks do earn that money, which the publisher or record label will collect. And then, as per your agreement, it's been agreed that you will be paid a royalty. So it's not 100% of the money, of course, because the publisher or the record label will take their percentage, and that's how they make their money. That's how they, make bank. But the rest of that goes to you. And Emi, let's talk about, a typical administration agreement. Like, what sort of a percentage is the publisher taking, and what sort of a percentage is going to the songwriter, for example?
I mean, I don't know if I can say specific rates, but
But
guess
it's typically lower, right? The percentage.
yeah, with an admin deal, you're usually, as a songwriter, getting the vast majority.
Yeah, I think I'll go out on a limb to say that, because I think it's standard across the board, but anywhere between 10 to 20 to 25% is going to the publishing administrator, and then the rest is yours. And that does depend on the different income streams. And just as a brief refresher, we talked about this. If you're not familiar with this, go back and check our episode out about royalties. But primarily when we're talking about publishing royalties, we're talking about mechanical royalties, which are the royalties paid every time there is a mechanical reproduction of your song. I guess the easiest thing to think about is printing of a CD, right? It's a mechanical process. You're copying that song for every CD you print. So there's a mechanical royalty that is due to the songwriter and their publishing representative. Then there are performance royalties when the song is performed in public, be it that the radio, even at a restaurant, or of course live shows. And then the third big type of publishing income is synchronization license income, which Emi has already talked a little bit about. That, for example, is if someone wants to synchronize your song to visual or still images, the best example is putting your music into a television program or a film. So, those are the main types of income that are out there. But it also, as Emma just said, it is a pennies business, and there are actually many, many different types of income streams for the publishing. So it's complex, and there are companies set up specifically to do a lot of this for you, and the administration side. So your royalty rates will vary depending on what type of income stream it is. But I think it's fair to say there are deals out there where they talk about the headline rate being a 90-10, 90 in favor of the songwriter, or an 80-20, or what the case may be.
So, Emi, let me ask you, when artists or songwriters are approaching you for these deals, do they typically know what type of deal they want already, or is there like a coaching that's you're sort of doing to say, oh, well, maybe if you guys aren't ready for the commitment of a co-pub, let's, start with an admin, and then, if there's options in the future, we can talk about that. Like, are you coaching them, or are they sort of especially with the bigger bands you work with, no, we're interested in a co-pub?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of coaching. I think a lot of people don't necessarily know what kind of deal they'd like to get into. But some people who have experience or well-established artists, maybe they already know they've done co-pub deals in the past. They don't really see the need to give up ownership because they're very self-contained, and maybe a publisher isn't going to add that much extra creative value. So they just want to do an admin deal. I mean, I would say what people prefer, it's really a very personal thing. I think it's just kind of what you're looking for in a deal, whether it's, I mean, some people think that if you do a co-pub deal, that you will get more services. And for me, I don't think that's personally true, but I think traditionally that has been the case. But yeah, I want to do the kind of deal that the client is comfortable doing. I'm not interested in pressuring anybody into a certain kind of deal because it makes the company more money, or that's never a good situation.
So in terms of artists on the roster, is every artist or every songwriter getting the same amount of attention when it comes to facilitating the syncs or creating opportunities to exploit the songs that they're writing?
I mean, is everybody no? I mean, I think it's impossible to give everybody the same amount of attention. It really, and the attention varies because maybe some people don't need that much attention because it's very low maintenance, and they deliver things, and they just, I don't know, there, of course, some artists or whatever, or songwriters, they need more attention because they're more active. And because they want us to be more involved. So we're setting up sessions. Other people, they just write their songs and deliver it to us, and we register them and then try and help market them. But they don't need, we're not setting up sessions all the time. So we're not talking all the time. So they're getting less attention in that regard.
Well, look, I think that's a really useful backdrop of, what a publisher does, the different types of deals that are available, and even just knowing that as a budding songwriter or a budding artist who writes their own songs, there is a different type of deal out there other than a record deal, and often that's useful for the purposes of the signing bonus or the advance that we talked about, that can be really useful for a lot of artists. And it's not just when you sign on. There's at different points of the contract, there's the obligation on the publisher to pay advances, and also they're doing all the good stuff which we've talked about. They're going out, registering your compositions, making sure that all the data is in the right places to ensure that each use gets picked up, the money gets collected, and you get paid royalty streams, whether that's every 6 months, a lot of the time you get cut a check, or maybe even more often than that. So that exists, and that's a goal for a lot of people. And hopefully, if you're listening and this has inspired you and you're like, I don't even want to be on the stage, but I love writing songs, and knowing that there are people like Emi who will be looking for that sort of talent. And often it's these people, songwriters, get signed, they're writing songs, and then A&Rs, people in Emi's position, have the what's the word I'm looking for, that they're equivalent at the record labels, where it's hey, you've got this artist, you're coming out with the second album, have you heard this song? And it's the song pitching sort of side, and maybe you get your song placed with a huge pop artist, and it could change your life, so it's that is something to go at, and it's useful to have that sort of a backdrop. I'm also conscious that a lot of our listeners and our viewers are not necessarily at the stage where that is in their immediate futures, but nevertheless, they write their own songs, they are out performing, and their music is on Spotify, all the DSPs, etc., etc. Are there any sort of immediate tips that someone who's writing their own songs and is in this sort of position if they don't know anything about songwriting and rights, etc., what are the steps that they should be considering? And I'll give you a little nudge. I'm specifically thinking about PROs and the like.
Yeah, I think step one for any burgeoning songwriter is getting signed up with a PRO. So in the US, you're primarily going to be signing up with ASCAP or BMI. Those are they're the two major players. There's CSAC, and then there's Global Rights
BMR,
Management. Yeah, which unless you're, Jay-Z or whatever, you're never going to be with GMR.
So I think it's fair for our listeners. CSAC and GMR are like invitation only. So again, maybe at some point that's going to be appealing to you. But unlike those two, ASCAP and BMI, anybody can join.
Yep, they're not for profits. I believe both are free registration, so you can go on their website and just fill out the application and sign up as a writer. There are if you want to sign up also as a publisher, which I think at the early stages you don't need to do that, because when you just sign up as a writer and you don't have a publishing entity, you will also receive your publishing share straight to your writer share account. So
yeah, and I think that two things, PRO, or that there's a lot of acronyms banded around in the music industry in general, never more so than in publishing. But PRO, what does that stand for?
Stands for Performing Rights Organization.
Okay, so we're specifically talking back to those royalties and the many different royalties. One of the main ones, if not the main one right now, is the performing royalties, the performing rights. So ASCAP and BMI, they're taking care of all that good stuff, but limited to or specifically performance royalties.
So yes, the PROs are created specifically for performing rights registrations and stuff, but it's kind of more than that. Like, even if you aren't just focused on collecting performing rights with those mechanical royalties or for sync and stuff, you need to be signed up and you need to have your songs registered there, because that's like the global database where it's kind of, the record of, and when I say record, like proof that you wrote this song, that this is the song title, these are the songwriters, this is who represents that work. So it's important outside of just performance royalties.
I guess it's like that's almost like, the Bible of information that everyone looks to. It's so well documented, etc., that this is sort of like what everyone looks to if they're looking for a definitive
Penny, you had a question?
guide.
Yes, I have a quick question. Amy, when artists and songwriters approach the publisher, right? A lot of songwriters do music on their own, but their music is not published. Basically, nobody records it yet, or it's done. Do you still find unpublished music when you sign someone, or sometimes it's better when the songwriters on their own get their music placed and released, and that music, when, let's say you get to place a song with a big artist or with a few big artists, gets a little more attention, or you still focus on mostly the songwriting skill and the actual song and looking for the perfect song? Does that make a difference? It's like when a record label signs an artist. Before we had development deals, right? When the artist, it doesn't matter if he was famous or not or had anything, they take time developing, but now it's a little bit different. So how does that relate in publishing?
So yes, I think we still will sign songwriters who don't necessarily have those big cuts yet. So there's two things. Like, when you said unpublished, do you mean that they haven't even registered their songs, or they've never had a publishing deal before?
By unpublished, I mean unreleased.
Okay. Okay, so obviously your music doesn't have to be released. We could definitely, I could find somebody whose music that, I don't know, I got turned on to by somebody else, whatever, and you just see some potential there. And of course, I guess at some point the music has to be released because otherwise you're not earning any money.
Of course.
So, and the goal is, of course, to earn royalties and, you know, for us to get paid for our work. So that's the long-term goal. Do you have to have something released? Not necessarily. Is it, of course, it's great when people already have some level of activity and then we can just like enhance that. But certainly, you know, people will sign developing songwriters or producers because we see something in them and see like, okay, yeah, like I can work with that. I know, you know, how to develop your career, what artists or what kind of rooms you should be in, and going from that. I would say we sign less of those because it takes a lot of time. And it's a much longer road to seeing a return and stuff. But I think like at the end of the day, most A&R people, like that's the passion projects. So you definitely do those kinds of things. You just have to make sure that you're like, you fully believe in it because it takes time, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question, Danny. So, yeah, there's a lot to it. A lot to the publishing game, I think it's fair to say.
Would you? I had a quick question based off of that. Would you say that the artists that you're working with, because you're working with a few big names, right? Are you dealing with catalog a lot of the time, or is it strictly new music when it comes to like the co-publishing deals?
I don't know if I would say there's more than the other. A lot of deals that we do, there's some catalog that comes into the deal that will also represent, or sometimes their catalog is already represented by somebody else and we call it futures. So just working on the new material. It really, I would say one is not more common than the other. It just depends.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of one thing I wanted to talk about too was like facilitating the writing of a song and sort of the role that you play in that. So like things like writing camps and things like that. And you know, you had talked before and said that, you know, some writers / artists need maybe more attention than others. But do you have like a network that you tap into when it comes to like writing camps? Like how does that happen?
I guess it really depends on like the focus of the camp. Because I am working with a lot of artists, you know, they're on tour. So it depends on people's schedules. But I think all opportunities, the most important thing is like what it needs creatively. So yeah, of course, there are some people who I know can do like anything and are mostly available, and maybe they're my go-tos. But in general, I think it's always about what works for the creative opportunity. You can't just like push like 5 people for everything, even if it doesn't make sense, you know? Like, am I gonna send somebody who I know like is only a producer, can't do any top line for a session that needs only a top liner, somebody who writes vocal and melody? No, just, you know, like you have to know what makes sense in the creative situation.
Catered for the specific.
Yeah, you can't shove
project.
What is it, a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're giving active feedback during this time, or how do you approach like maybe critiquing like what's coming out of the camps or like the new music that they're giving you?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely give creative feedback. I think the style and the amount of creative feedback differs on the person. To be honest, I'm not the type who like goes through a song and makes like a ton of notes and says change this, you know, note and verse and lyric. That's kind of not my style. I'm more like, okay, listen to it. Okay, you know, I think I like it. This part works. Maybe like, I wish there was a bridge or something sounds, you know.
More cowbell?
Yeah, more cowbell. Yeah, totally. Things like that. I'm not, I know some people like give like really detailed notes. That's not really me, but we do give notes.
I think that brings. I do want to circle back to talk, you know, a little bit more about registrations and what sort of like our listeners can be doing today to help themselves in the publishing sphere. But continuing with this line of questioning, when we talk about writing sessions, etc. I think it's fairly well known now that, especially in the pop world, there are many different writers. I mean, I think you're up to an average of somewhere between 7 and 9 at least.
I don't know.
Different
That's
writers.
an average? I hope not.
I heard that if you look at the top,
Okay.
like the charts,
Mhm.
like it
Yeah.
averaged out at somewhere between 7 and 9 songwriters. So I guess the point is that like there's a lot of people potentially, and there are different ways as to how it can quickly add up to that. But in any case, if you're going into a writing session and there's 3 or 4 people in the room, I guess talk to us about splits and, you know, how that works out, any sort of best practice for agreeing. And when we talk about splits, we're just essentially saying like, hey, there was a song written today between the 3 or the 4 of us. Who contributed what? How are we going to split the ownership? And we're talking about percentages typically. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about splits and best practice, do's and don'ts, and any sort of like little nuggets of wisdom that you can impart on that.
So generally we think of a song as out of 100% or 100 points. So that's usually a good place to start. Some people like to think of a song as 50% music, 50% vocal top line. That's not like a hard and fast rule. That's just kind of an overly simplified way to think of it.
It is vocal top line. Is lyrics embodied in that?
Yeah, lyrics, melody, that side. So a lot of people think of it that way. You don't have to, though. A song can be carved up at least 100 different ways. So, and how you split that up depends on the situation and the comfort level. And it's a tough question. People ask that a lot, like, how should I split my publishing? Again, it's a very personal decision. And you have to kind of, I mean, it's, I guess thinking of a 50-50 is, you know, a good place to start. But it doesn't have to be that way.
I'll say something about that, because as a producer, I've been in a lot of sessions with different kind of artists, and I've realized that the contributions are really hard to measure when it comes down to making a good song. It could be that one line that makes the whole song, and somebody probably did 90% of the lyrics, but another person said
change the one word.
Yeah, change the one word and makes it very relevant. And I've found that when there's like a good communication between the parts, it works to agree in advance to go into a room with the fact that whatever we do here is going to be evenly split. And it helps, especially for I'm saying this for especially like the younger generations and the people that is going into this business, you know, because you never know what your contribution is going to bring to the table at the end of the day, and it can make a big difference. And sometimes people, especially when you start working with bigger artists and bigger companies and things like that, people minimize the work of someone that has not so much relevance because of their experience, but they probably brought everything that made the song special. So
yeah,
fight for your percentage, guys.
Yeah, I think I've seen it a few different ways. Like personally, like with bands, it's like either maybe you have like core members of the band who write all the songs, and like sort of everyone in the band participates more on the master side, or you, like you were saying, you agree in advance and everybody's going in understanding we're all getting equal splits on this song, or you know, you're always going to get 10%, you're always going to get whatever the case may be. But I guess I have a question off of that. Have you ever had clients where, you know, they did not agree on the splits, or things got sort of sour when it came to the publishing end? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, splits, like I said before, it's a very personal decision at the end of the day, and it is really hard to, you know, decide how much somebody's worth or deserves for their contributions. It's not an exact science. It's more, you know, there is a method to it, but it is very emotional at the same time. So yeah, I mean, definitely people get bent out of shape and feel disrespected because they feel like they contributed more than, you know, what they're being offered and stuff. It's a difficult situation. And I think the best thing to do is, if you can, if you're not agreeing in advance that you're going to split everything equally and you're going to figure it out afterwards, if there's not an understanding, then you really should kind of like take notes and afterwards and think about like, okay, I, you know, wrote this. It doesn't have to be like every line or like every note of the song, but to say like, okay, I wrote all the music for the verses and contributed this part to the chorus, and maybe I added this to the bridge or whatever, and I think that's worth 35% of the song. So that if there is a kind of dispute, you can say like, this is what I, you know, and at the end of the day, it is very much a he said, she said.
Mm-hmm.
That's just kind of the nature of it. But having some backup or proof that you can, you know, say what you contributed, but it's a negotiation at the end of the day. So if you don't agree, if everybody doesn't agree, then it causes what we call a conflict. And that has ramifications on how royalties are collected. Basically, like the process just freezes. Or if the song doesn't get registered because you can't agree to who, you know, wrote what.
Yeah, so it's a good point. And a negotiation is just that. It's a negotiation. You have to be flexible, and in what's the thing about a good negotiation is, you know, everyone's happy. The next best thing is no one's happy.
Yeah. Definitely the case sometimes.
So, but yeah, so that's a really good tip about, you know, making notes. And because I think it's fair to say that usually, especially in these songwriting sessions, the song might not be finished or even written in that one session. It could be written over the course of several different sessions, even with new people added, etc.
Which I think is probably the case when you're talking about like if the song has 7 or 9 people. Like, it wasn't 9 people in the room to start.
No,
it was 3 or 4, and then the song wasn't done, and then somebody worked on it more with somebody else, or somebody added a sample or whatever. Like
the producers brought in.
Yeah.
I don't know if we talked about this in previous episodes, but that kind of reminds me of Kanye West in a way. Regardless of what you think about him personally, I think he's infamous for, like, you know, being generous with his splits. So like if you brought everybody their drinks during a session, he'll give you like 1% or something like that.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that, but that's great. I want to deliver his coffee.
Yeah. I'd say he'd be famous. I'd be famous.
Because I guess the rationale is whatever you're essentially like a muse, like whatever you did to inspire this song, you deserve credit for.
I can imagine Kanye coming up with that. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
I guess when you have so much money, you can
Just
give
it away.
gifts like
Generous.
It's
that.
when you
Yeah.
don't have any money or a struggling band coming up, you start getting real petty with those splits, you know. And I feel like, you know, maybe
Which is most of the cases.
yeah, I think it gets maybe more complicated when you have like different songwriters who don't really know each other. They're just in there for that session. But I feel like with a band, it can either go like everybody's sort of on the same page, or there's like, you know, there's like emotions in the band that haven't really been talked through yet, and that sort of manifests when it comes to like splits and songwriting and stuff like that.
Yeah, man, you're so right. We've talked about this before. Everything that involves money, like, you know, we shy away from these difficult conversations. It's like human nature, but it's the same advice again. You got to be upfront. You got to address it head on, and you got to have these awkward conversations, because everyone, you know, there is no set formula and people have different approaches. And if you are the only songwriter in the band and you're coming, like, that's a good example, and you're coming with the thing mostly baked, you know, you can just imagine that you feel like you've got a fairly good case that 100% of the publishing royalties should be coming to you. However, you know, it's that old thing. You need the band.
Oh,
I played the cowbell.
Yeah,
give me 30%. You know.
Well,
Also because in the live setting, right? Like they're going to be they're maybe you wrote the song, but they're performing it on the record. That's them playing the guitar and the drums, and then they're playing it live. And it's not the band without everybody.
It's not the band without everyone. That's what you've got to realize. It's like, sometimes it's like to get this thing off the ground and to keep this whole thing together, maybe there's a price there that's worth it, to give away. And I think that's why there are a lot of bands who famously split the publishing equally, even though, the songwriting is definitely, by one or
the Beatles, Lennon McCartney had like a partnership, right? Where they, even if one would write a song and the other would write a song, they would all be like Lennon McCartney.
Yeah, that's right.
I think I've heard that before. I forget that story, but
yeah. And I think it's when you're listening to a song, this is where it gets complicated, right? I think people who write melodies and people who write lyrics need to be respected, and because that is the song at the end of the day. But it's also like, you imagine just one of your favorite songs and like that riff that really like catches you, or that drum beat that like really, really makes a song on that break. And then I think, that's kind of where it gets complicated, because you may love the bridge or whatever, but like whatever that one part is that sort of keeps you in the song is also, you could argue, as equally relevant,
Yeah, well, I think a lot of songwriters would disagree with what you just said, that the lyrics and the melody are the song, because there are certainly a lot of amazing instrumental songs and compositions. Maybe that's the part of the song that, you can immediately recall, but there are lots of elements of songs where it's not just a vocal melodic hook. There could be rhythmic hooks.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, lots of production details that really like make the song. Like, it's interesting. I forget. There's like a Bruno Mars song that came out a few years ago, and like there's just this little production element that's really kind of like the hook, and like it gets stuck in your head. Of course, I can't remember what it's called, but like, I felt like that's what made the song. Yeah, like the vocal hook and stuff is cool, but the song is definitely not just.
Are you talking about Uptown Funk, maybe?
I feel like it was. Maybe I think it was after that. We'll have to get that
cleared.
I mean,
I was very short. That was a very short sample.
Well, it's like a question. Can you copyright a groove? Is that something you can copyright? It's like Marvin Gaye's estate would say yes.
The Robin Thicke.
Oh man, let's not even get started on that. But look, I'm conscious of the time. I feel like we could talk for another hour here at least. So it's super grateful and for your time. Very generous.
One more round of applause.
But before I want to. I want to circle back to the sort of things that I did promise the listeners I would do this. So sign up with the PRO, be it ASCAP or BMI. I think it's fair to say that
or whatever your local society
it's a personal choice. Okay, so we've lost the video, but that actually means we can continue with the audio without so much of a rush. So, but yeah, whoever your local society is, it's ASCAP or BMI in the States. But if you're in the UK, it's going to be PRS. And there's wherever you are, your local territory will have one.
Most other countries don't have like choices. There's generally just one.
Yeah. And that's going to take care of the performance royalties side of things. I know specifically there's a tip, and not a lot of people do this, but if they're performing live, no matter what level, and they're performing at venues across the city that they're in, anything they should do before or after they've played?
Yep. So at least in the States, and I'm not sure if all the international PROs have the same setup, but there are ASCAP on stage and BMI live. And that's after you've registered your songs. Like, you're signed up with those societies, you've registered your copyrights, then anytime you play a show, or let's say if you're a songwriter and some other artist has performed your song live, you then go ahead and register the show and the set list, so that the PRO can pay you the live performance income on that, because they know those songs were actually performed. Otherwise, if you don't do things like that, the societies don't necessarily know who played those shows or what songs were played. And then there's this whole like black box income stuff, which is a whole nother story, but yep, you as a songwriter need to go ahead and make these registrations, because actually, even if you have a publisher, unless your tour or your performances are in the top 200 or 300 tours of the year, the publishers cannot make these registrations for you. We can only collect, or we can only register set lists for those top earning tours, as opposed, and this is just the US. Outside of the US, it's different. But in the US, if you're just like playing a local club, you're doing club shows, like that kind of stuff, you, the songwriter, need to go on and make the registrations yourself.
That is a top tip, because that is money back in your pocket. And it can be, you know, it's like, as we say, it's a pennies game, but all this money adds up over time. So you're entitled to it. Make your registrations.
Most songwriters call it mailbox money.
Love that. Love the mailbox money.
Mailbox money means like you get a check every 4 to 6 months for a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 or whatever. And I don't know, you buy Christmas presents or whatever. Like, it's maybe not paying your bills, but you look forward to getting that. You know?
Yeah. So that's definitely something you should be doing. And then this would be a topic we could talk at length about. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do it in this episode. However, the mechanical royalties, okay, like in the digital era and with the Music Modernization Act that's just been passed and has now come into force, we have the Mechanical Licensing Collective. I think it's fair to say that everyone should go out and register with Mechanical Licensing Collective. I think it's just www.themlc.com.
Yes. That once you're already set up with a PRO and you've made registrations and stuff, then also sign up with the MLC.
Yeah, and that way you will get your mechanical royalties from the streaming and download sites. And we will talk about that in more detail, because that really is like an interesting topic and very much related to publishing. So, but those are a couple of tips that people can go out and just make sure they're doing right away and get that stuff sorted. So
and I also recommend, once you're signed up and you're starting to release music and all that, registering your copyrights in advance of them being released. That's, if you wait till afterwards, you could miss royalty distributions, and people don't know where to pay and things like that. So you could lose royalties if you're registering afterwards. There is a small window, or there is a window of time where you can collect back royalties, but you're better off doing it in advance so you don't have to collect back royalties. It's
okay. All right. Well, look, those are
I want to say one quick thing before we go, because I'm very curious, Amy. When you started into this world of publishing, what brought you into this field? What's the story right there? I'm very curious, because I feel like for musicians and for songwriters, a lot of times we do this because we're musicians, right? But then sometimes we change into like the business side of things. So I want to know, like, what brought you into like publishing? What's your quick story? If you
this will be a quick outro.
quick outro.
So publishing, I honestly fell into it. Like, I was really into the live side, and I went to college for music industry because I always loved music, but I didn't want to be a performer. I wasn't a songwriter, but I just love music as a fan, and loved going to concerts and putting on shows in college. That's what I was involved with, the concert board, and we booked shows. And so I thought I wanted to do concert promotion. But, when you graduate college, you need a job, and I got a job at a music publishing company. So I really just kind of fell into it. But then, what is it? I don't know. It's been like 14 years now. So it wasn't like the path that I thought I was going on. But I realized that when I knew what publishing was, but I didn't really understand the business. But as I got into it, I realized how important publishing really is, and how we get to be as equally as creative and as involved as a record label. A&R, I think they get all the shine, but we get to do a lot as well. And the nice thing too, as a publisher, is that like, I'm not tied to working with just artists from one label. I get to work with every label.
Everybody.
Yeah, I'm like Switzerland. So we're like neutral. We sign anywhere. So yeah, it was not what I thought I was going to do, but eventually fell in love with.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. Thank
Yeah,
you.
good to know that there's that's an opportunity. If you're not a songwriter but you want to work in that field, then maybe you could follow in Emi's footsteps and
DM
be signing-
Emi your resume.
You'll be signing the stars of tomorrow. So
yes.
But listen, Emi, thanks so much. You've been very generous with your time, and I fully appreciate it. And I hope a lot of our listeners and viewers can take some fantastic pearls of wisdom that you've been able to share with us, and just get inspired. That's what we're here to do. So Tim, why don't you remind everyone about the social media details?
Yes. Thanks again for listening to the Record Shepherds. You can listen to us where all podcasts are published. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and email us at therecordshepards@gmail.com if you have any questions.
Yeah, and do all that stuff. Follow us along, subscribe to us, and please write in, comment, whatever you want. If there's specific topics that you'd like us to cover, and if you live in the New York area or you're going to be swinging by and you have anything that you'd like to discuss, it'd be great to hear from you. But until then, keep tuning in to the episodes of the Record Shepherds, and remember to follow the guidance of the shepherds.
Don't be the sheep.
Be the goat. Thank you.